I'm sure many of you like sports, and first-class sports players are admired by many people, especially by teens. They imitate them and want to be like them. However, the athletes, their hard training isn't much known, and they would train around 5 to 6 hours a day and 6 days a week. Let me share a quotation from Bees Inside the Games Bees. It says, "The extraordinary dedication and hard work by athletes hoping to compete in the London 2012 Olympics has been revealed in a new research by the National Lottery. Stars such as Jessica Ennis will have put in an unbelievable 10,000 hours of blood, sweat, and tears in the 4 years leading up to the games," it is claimed. Isn't that amazing? Right? And how much time they were planning at the time. They were planning to put to be in London Olympic. And I believe this is not the only case for the elite sports players, but most people who are in top places in their fields. Then I'm wondering, can we apply the same principle to spiritual training? I'm not trying to give you a direct answer, but give you a chance to think about it as you listen to the sermon today. And I'm sure it will be a valuable lesson. And this morning we are going to listen to Joseph's story one more time, continuing from last week, but in a little bit different aspect. Let me see your hands. How many of you want to be like Joseph? Okay, then another question should be asked. How many of you want to go through what Joseph had experienced? Right, two different stories, right? From a favorite child of a billionaire, that's who Jacob was, and becoming a victim of attempted murder, a victim of human trafficking, and both of them were done by half-brothers. Sad. Sold as a slave in a foreign country, a victim of a sexual harassment. Even though he was the victim, he became a prisoner. And eventually he also was betrayed by an inmate. And what do you expect next? If someone tells you their personal story with the contents I told you, either something more miserable will come or something greatly opposite, right? And we know the story of Joseph. It turned into an amazing miracle. And how did Joseph overcome such difficult and painful path? And I'm sure he had many confusing and hurting moments, but he took them as training to be greater. He learned to depend on God and developed the faith to trust Him. The book of Patriarchs and Prophets describes that being sold as a slave was a turning point in his life, from a spoiled and arrogant boy to a humble and God-seeking man. Let me share some quotation from the book. Joseph believed that the God of his fathers would be his God. He then and there gave himself fully to the Lord. And he prayed that the keeper of Israel would be with him in the land of his exile. The next quotation. He would serve the Lord with undivided heart. He would meet the trials of his lot with fortitude and perform every duty with fidelity. One day's experience had been the turning point in Joseph's life. Its terrible calamity had transformed him from a petty child to a man thoughtful, courageous, and self-possessed. After that's happened on the day he was carried to Egypt by Ishmaelites. Then we can find out that God was with him wherever he was from the Bible. Okay, so it's in Genesis chapter 39. We are going to read 2 verses, verse 2 and 21st. The Lord, verse 2 says, the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a successful man. And he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. Okay, later on he was imprisoned, right? And then verse 21 says, but the Lord was with Joseph, even though when he was in prison, and showed him mercy. And he gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. Okay, let me ask you another question. Maybe more than one. Which would be safer? To sleep in a 5-star hotel without God's presence, or to sleep in the Amazon jungle in God's presence? And which one would you choose? Yeah? Please don't be hurried to answer it, but think about it deeply. Psalm 41 verse 10, the poet says, for a day in your court is better than 1,000. I would rather be a doorkeeper in the house of God than dwell in the tents of wickedness. After all these trials, a miracle happened, right? From a slave to be a prime minister in a foreign country. We can find people who saved the country after went through hard trials in history. And I thought about Nelson Mandela. He was the head of an anti-government group, and he was arrested with more than 100 followers on charges of treason. And he was sentenced to life imprisonment. And even in prison, he led his anti-government group. But he began to realize that it would only lead destruction of the country. His heart had been transformed while he was in prison. He became a peacemaker. And he was in prison for 27 years. And 2 years after he got free, he received the Nobel Peace Prize. And the following year, he was elected as the first black president in South Africa. You know what? If he wasn't changed, if he hadn't become a peacemaker, South Africa we know today may not exist. His trials brought changes in his life, and he saved the nation. Okay, let's go back to Joseph. The greatest trial arrived after the miracle to become a prime minister. One day, his 10 brothers came to Egypt to buy food and bowed down before him with their faces to the ground. What a moment! Jacob reminded his dreams. He probably never forgot his dreams. They could be another sustaining power in Egypt. What could he do to those who sold him as a slave? even the attempt to kill him. Even though at that time Joseph was sitting in the prime minister's seat, he could be beaten as slave and dead and be completely forgotten. With a single command, he could execute them. They didn't have any power to resist, but Joseph, he had all the power to harm them. The result? We know he didn't execute them, but decided to test them. And after the test, when Joseph was convinced that they were changed men, he made himself known to them. I am Joseph. Does my father still live? Now we can imagine that their hearts were almost stopped when he said, I am Joseph. And Joseph said to his brothers, please come near to me. So they came near. Then he said, I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. But now do not therefore be grieved or angry with yourselves, because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. He told his brothers to go back and come back with the father and their families, since there would be 5 more years of a famine. So they went back and told the father everything happened in Egypt. Then Jacob said, it is enough. Joseph, my son, is still alive. I will go and see him before I die. Why not? And even God confirmed the plan. Then God spoke to Israel, Jacob, right? In the visions of the night and said, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, here I am. And so he said, I am God, the God of your father. Do not fear to go down to Egypt, for I will make of you a great nation there. I will go down with you to Egypt. I like this part. I will go down with you to Egypt, and I will also surely bring you up again, and Joseph will put his hand on your eyes. So they all moved to Egypt and lived in Goshen. And Jacob lived in Egypt for 17 years. Then I'm sure the happiest years in Jacob's life. And died when he was 147 years old. After Jacob's death, when his brothers were afraid of Joseph's revenge, they asked for forgiveness, quoting the father's word. Then Joseph said to them, do not be afraid, for am I in the place of God? But as for you, you meant evil against me. But God meant it for good, in order to bring it about as it is this day, to save many people alive. After all the trials, after all the hardships, Joseph realized that God used evil situations to prepare himself to save his entire family and many other people. Indeed, God used him to save many people alive. Joseph didn't only save them physically, but spiritually too. Think about it. What if Joseph didn't forgive them, but revenge them? The whole family would be blood-stained and filled with great anger and hurts. And you probably haven't experienced the same trials that Joseph had. but surely you have. Then you have overcome many trials and tests until this day. And have you ever thought about why you have been here as you are and the situation as it is today? Let me repeat the question again. Have you ever thought about why you have been here as you are and the situation as it is today? Would God have the same plan for you as He had for Joseph? And any possibility to save many people through you? Our church board talked about evangelism for this year 2021. And we'd like to have small group based crusade meetings. In other words, each small group or combined small groups hold crusade meetings. Details will be discussed later. But this morning, before I finish, I'd like to suggest one goal. When your small group gets together, from this week, and every week, please pray to God. Please pray to God to add at least one new soul to your small group in 2021. And there will be fresh and powerful fuel to energize or re-energize your group. I can sense that the Lighthouse of Church, our church, has been ready to be used as a powerful God's tool. I can also feel that God has been testing us whether we are ready to obey His leading. Jesus said that harvest is truly plentiful, but harvesters are few, which means many souls are ready to be saved, but not many churches are ready to have them and nurture them to be spiritual adults. God will save many people through the body of the Lighthouse of a Church if we obey Him. As I often say, evangelism is God's work. Our role is to obey His leadership. Would you like to join Him to add new souls to your small group? Would you like to join Him to add new souls to your small group? And if your answer is yes, can I see your hand? Would you like to join Him to add new souls to your small group? When you have a new spiritual baby in your small group, you may tell them what Joseph said to his brothers. He said, God sent me before ahead of you to preserve life. You may tell them. To new souls in your small group, tell them, God led me to know Jesus ahead of you. Why? To help you to know Him and be saved. May God bless you. And may God bless your small group too. Bless many people in your circle and save them. Amen.